AdvoKAYte, holding healthcare accountable. This podcast is my way of sharing what I've learned about the mistakes, the cover-ups, and the ways we can all protect ourselves. We're all in this together. Welcome back to this week's episode of AdvoKAYte, holding healthcare accountable. I'm pleased as punch to have as our guest this week Dr. Martin Lazar. Dr. Lazar is an experienced, credible, wonderful neurosurgeon and human being, and I'm just so pleased to have him here with us today. Welcome, Dr. Lazar.
Thank you, Kay. It's my privilege.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out to come and talk with us today. I wanted to begin by having you tell us a little bit about your career as a neurosurgeon. I know many people know of you and your involvement in the doctor death cases, but not a lot has been said publicly about all of the good clinical work you did.
Yeah, thank you. Neurosurgery has been a love affair and a hobby for a very long time. My primary interests in the surgical practice developed early in the realm of minimally invasive surgery and microvascular surgery, the application of very fine, meticulous techniques in confined spaces. And that evolved over the years, and to a very large extent now is about the standard of practice. It's been very rewarding and a great deal of fun.
Well, you are the kind of physician and surgeon that we need more of these days, the kind of physician and surgeon that I would want taking care of me. God forbid I ever needed a brain surgery or a spine surgery, and someone I would want my friends or family or loved ones to see. So you're...
Well, thank you. You're very kind.
Don't let that rumor get around. But you're a good human being, Dr. Lazar. So anyway, enough with the platitudes. Let's get to work here. Let's begin by you telling us about how you became aware of Christopher Duntsch and then how you became involved as a medical expert witness.
I received 2 phone calls from friends who were also plaintiff attorneys in Dallas, both of whom told me hair-raising stories about a neurosurgeon who had recently come to Dallas and had perpetrated disastrous results. And so they sent me information about those cases. And I subsequently heard from one of my colleagues who happened to be on staff at Baylor Plano Hospital, in addition to the hospital that I practiced at. And he was an intensive care specialist and had been called to see a couple of Duntsch's patients and became aware of it. And so he confided some information about it and sought my advice on how to handle that information. The plaintiff attorneys sent me the information, and I created reports related to this. But I subsequently heard from other plaintiff attorneys, and these were cases in the same vein, disastrous results. Subsequent to that, I contacted the chief attorney at the Texas Medical Board to alert him, if he wasn't already aware, of Christopher Duntsch, and gave him the information that I thought he needed. Nothing was done at the board level. And the physician who had contacted me from the Plano hospital seeking advice was also a member of the Texas Medical Board. And he subsequently alerted them, and again, nothing was done. Part of the difficulty with the Texas Medical Board, they prioritize complaints. And a complaint coming from a physician is at the lowest level of priority. If a complaint comes from a patient, that's the highest level of priority. And so, for whatever reason, Duntsch was not evaluated in a critical manner. After all these medical malpractice cases were filed, and the board was made aware of them, they still did nothing. Ultimately, after some truly disastrous results, the board contacted me and asked me to review 4 cases on a formal basis. I had already evaluated 3 of those, and the 4th one was new, but the result was no different from the other ones that I had reviewed, and I recommended that his license be revoked. And in fact, we had an emergency meeting by telephone on a Saturday morning, and his license was lifted at that point. And that's how I got involved initially. Subsequently, several plaintiff attorneys forwarded their cases asking me to review them from a medical expert point of view. And I did. I think I evaluated 8 or 9 of those cases. And most of those, if not all of those, subsequently were cases that you handled.
So you've served as a medical expert witness in civil medical malpractice cases before.
Correct.
Testified on either side, on behalf of a patient, on behalf of a surgeon. And
Correct.
We know that the standard in a medical malpractice case against which a physician's conduct is judged is what would a reasonable and prudent spine surgeon do under the same or similar circumstances, or refrain from doing under the same or similar circumstances. That's a fancy way of stating what the negligence standard is. How were the cases that you reviewed different from ordinary negligence?
These were profound negligence. there was no possible way that a reasonably competent surgeon could end up doing the things that he did. Wrong diagnosis resulting in an operation that the patient didn't need, and having disastrous complications as a result. In one case, paralyzed the patient. In another case, literally killed the patient. And there were multiple cases like this, two of which resulted in needless death.
We all know that, surgeons don't give a warranty. Like when you buy a new car, you get a warranty for certain things. Surgeons don't give a warranty to patients that they're going to have a good outcome. Some bad outcomes happen to the very best surgeons. How were these kinds of complications and disastrous outcomes different from what's in the broad, universe of an acceptable bad result?
To start with, unindicated surgeries resulted in disastrous results. There's no way to get around that. It's not something that can be defended. There is no defense that's credible. And so the issue of operating in the wrong place and doing the wrong operation and getting a disastrous result is not something that is within the realm of leeway for malpractice.
Yeah. So we've heard Dr. Henderson in a prior episode describe that when he came in to take care of Mary Eford and he saw what he saw, that he thought this must have been an imposter because there was such a lack of appreciation for basic anatomy, complete lack of surgical technique, complete unawareness that he had created multiple dural tears, amputated nerve roots, malpositioned the hardware and whatnot, that Dr. Henderson was like, something's not adding up. I don't even think this person could be a physician. When you began reviewing the cases, what were the thoughts that were going through your head?
That something was staggeringly wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a similar kind of thing that Dr. Henderson experienced. In Mayor Eford's case, he was operating at the wrong level. He made the wrong diagnosis, operated at the wrong level, and did an operation that was so egregiously wrong. So unindicated surgery at the wrong level done badly is the standard of this man's practice. And in the cases that I reviewed, he killed a couple of people because of it. Yeah. And he crippled the others.
Some of the things that he did were hard to understand from a layperson's standpoint, much less, a neurosurgeon's standpoint. Like in the case of one patient, there was a client of mine, him doing an anterior approach to address a cervical disc, but he thought he encountered a tumor, is what we heard, and he began reaming that out, not realizing that that was the patient's esophagus. I mean,
actually, it was muscle.
Muscle, okay.
It was a patient, as you know,
yep.
Who had a very thick neck,
Yeah.
very muscular man. And there's a pair of muscles that run along the front of the cervical spine, which in most people is a narrow muscle running vertically along the front of the spine. But this man had a short, thick neck, very muscular, and that was a prodigious muscle. It was big enough that the muscle on the left and the muscle on the right virtually met in the middle. They were overgrown. It's not pathological, it's within the realm of a normal structure. But he didn't recognize this, and he thought that that muscle was a tumor. And he biopsied it, and of course, it came back eventually as identified as muscle. But it also bled profusely because that muscle enjoys a robust blood supply. And once he had all that bleeding, he couldn't identify any anatomy, and he had to abandon the operation. But in the course of the operation, he also lacerated the esophagus. It was just a disastrous procedure and another example of operating at the wrong level.
Then covered up the crime, so to speak, with the surgical sponge and closed the patient up, which was set up for a rampant infection.
He left the sponge in the patient's neck, right?
Yep. Another case that you reviewed, which also happened to be my client, he actually, it was another anterior approach, cervical spine surgery, and he actually reamed out bits of the patient's spinal cord, resulting in paralysis of that patient. Do you remember that case?
Yes.
I mean, how can a physician who graduated from a prestigious neurosurgical fellowship not understand that they're taking bits out of a patient's spinal cord?
That's a good question. I'm going to leave the training program aside.
Yes.
Because of issues related to that program and the surgeon who is responsible for his training. It's inconceivable that someone leaving a program could leave with that level of profound ignorance of anatomy, let alone surgical technique. There's no explanation for this other than the fact that he was an incompetent surgeon from every aspect. There was nothing about Duntsch that you could say that was acceptable. He couldn't even make an accurate diagnosis. He failed to make an accurate diagnosis in most of the cases that I reviewed.
So, with respect to the residency program, was this one bad apple residency program director in a once-in-a-lifetime situation, and never before and never since will we ever have this problem again, so we can wash our hands of it and sleep well at night?
It's not an issue of a one-off case. It is an example of the worst of the worst. but there are undoubtedly, and we know of graduates of other neurosurgical programs who have not distinguished themselves well and had horrible results. This program had, I think, in the time Duntsch was there, it had two directors. But he had other interests in during the course of his training. He actually spent more time in a laboratory setting, trying to identify and actually working out some techniques for creating new disc material, intervertebral disc material. And that research program, among a couple of others that he was doing, really took precedence over his spending time learning how to be a neurosurgeon. It was a conflict of interest in a way, which interfered with his being trained adequately.
Because the director of the residency program also had a financial stake in Duntsch's stem cell patent.
The director of the neurosurgical residency program, as I said, there were two. The first one, who subsequently retired, I think he did have an investment in that entity. I don't believe the second one did. But one of the training neurosurgeons, staff neurosurgeons, senior staff neurosurgeons had a major investment in that experiment, and he was the one in charge of the so-called fellowship program from which Duntsch graduated, and he was the one who provided subsequent hospitals that Duntsch applied to when he went into practice. He was the one who provided the recommendation for staff privileges.
And I'd like to note parenthetically that no individual or the program itself faced any repercussions, no consequences whatsoever for
Correct.
enabling this and unleashing this monster on the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And, in my simple way of looking at things, I'm like, is it possible that, the day before Duntsch left Tennessee, he was a competent and safe and sane neurosurgeon, and then he gets on an airplane and comes to Dallas, and all of a sudden he is a, mass murderer?
The air in Dallas is imperfect. And so it must have been that first breath of Dallas air that made him into a different person.
Right.
And it's just outrageous to suggest that there was a change in him from Memphis to Dallas.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody knows that all doctors go through a number of years of training, but the more skilled and the more specialized, the more years of training. So Duntsch would have had, with his medical school, 4 years, Residency would be 3 years or 4?
No, I think his was 5.
Okay. So, and then,
Because he had to do a year of general surgery, I believe.
and then he would have a fellowship, a year
Right.
or so. So what are we talking, like, for the average neurosurgeon, what, 7 or 8 years of
These years, nowadays, it's 8 years.
after medical
Back,
school?
yes. Back then, it was 5 years.
Okay. So 5 years, 8 years. I think everyone would assume that the reason that it takes that long to be trained how to be a neurosurgeon is because it's complex and it requires a lot of hands-on skill and training. As well, the expectation of residency programs is that they only graduate from their programs surgeons who are safe and competent and sane.
That's the hope.
That's the hope. But where have we gone wrong there?
In my opinion, this program failed that responsibility. But there are other levels of failure in Duntsch's case. Some of those failures have been changed. The American Board of Neurological Surgery, which is the entity that is responsible for evaluating and helping to certify training programs and the training of those residents and certifying the graduates who take certification exams. At the time that Duntsch was trained and after he graduated, he was not required to be board certified or board eligible, that is, eligible to take board certification exams. That was not a requirement of the training program. Now, all training programs are required to register the neurosurgical trainee, and that trainee is required to take periodic examinations during training, and once they're completed training, take a complex examination to determine whether or not they have the requisite skills and knowledge. Those trainees have to submit case logs. In other words, for every operative case that they participate in, they have to log in what the diagnosis was, what the operation was, what their role was, and what the result was. Neurosurgery has changed those rules so that this is now mandatory for all training programs. That does not exist for any other branch of medicine. No other surgical program has that requirement. And that change has happened because of the experience with Duntsch. The American Board of Neurological Surgery was under tremendous pressure to change the system of certification because of the adverse publicity resulting from the Duntsch case.
Well, and kudos to you because you were very instrumental in driving those changes. But it's interesting because no one ever thinks it's going to happen to them. Patients don't think they're ever going to have disaster strike their lives by virtue of a doctor death or preventable medical error. And other specialties think, oh, well, that's a neurosurgery problem. That's not going to affect us. And, you and I have spoken at length about why no one could get the attention of the ACGME, the American College of Graduate Medical Education, that is the umbrella organization over all specialty residency programs. And I wonder if that's part of the reason is they think, well, that's a neurosurgery problem and that's not a systemic problem. But do you see it as a systemic problem?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And it's not that difficult for the various boards in the different surgical specialties to make the changes that neurosurgery did. It's just not a priority for them. I guess it isn't until there's some catastrophe like Duntsch that grabs the attention of the general public, and there's so much adverse publicity raining down on that formal medical entity that change becomes a necessity.
Well,
ACGME could require it, and that's who we selected as the most likely entity to approach. The reception was not a gracious one, and they just don't want to be bothered.
Well, I think similarly in the work we've done since Dr. Death with our No More Dr. Deaths group, that there's been similar apathy on the part of politicians, government officials.
Right.
What's it going to take?
That's why the group that you've put together, which I'm happy to participate in, has a very important task. Those of us who are involved with it really do understand the nitty-gritty of the problem and how difficult the task is to change it. It's going to require some federal legislation, in my view, and it's going to require, among other things, an important change to the National Practitioner Data Bank. They are the repository of information on poorly functioning physicians, and that system is hopelessly failing, and it desperately needs to change.
Well, desperately is right. And, I know you and I have spoken about this, but that's part of the reason for the podcast is trying to almost raise this from the groundswell, a grassroots level. I had spoken with a lobbyist, I guess you could say, for a very important national organization. And I was like, we have a group of people, physicians, attorney, prosecutor, National Practitioner Data Bank chief officer, a hospital administrator. We're the insiders who know why these things happened, the fact that the system was broken before Dr. Death, system is still broken. We receive reports all the time of other catastrophic surgeons who hurt a lot of people. And so we've been banging this drum for the past decade or so. So I finally made my way to someone who knows how politics work in Washington, D.C., and I'm like, this is a really big and important issue, and it matters to everyone because everyone's a patient. Why can we not get any traction? And she said to me, it's because you don't have a group of a couple of 100,000 or millions of people behind you. And so the people are the patients. The problem is people are,
Educating them.
yes, people are busy in their lives and they never think something bad is going to happen to them. And we're not wanting to be fear mongers so that people don't go to the doctor. People should go to the doctor. But we just have got to educate people that we're all patients. We've got to educate these politicians. They're patients. 100% of their constituents are patients. And ultimately, people have to vote on politicians who will make patient safety issues a priority.
I agree.
Now,
It's quite a task.
whether we'll get that done in our lifetimes, I don't know.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to talk over you. I was trying to be lighthearted and saying whether that'll happen in our lifetimes or not is an open question. But
Right.
go, what were you saying?
Look at the television productions. I think there were 4 of them that were made related to Dr. Death, Christopher Duntsch. There was a remarkable podcast created, and it's been done in multiple languages in different parts of the world. And that was a huge audience that saw this. And yet it didn't really result in a change to our healthcare system as it relates to this kind of a problem. So for me, it's very frustrating, but I'm not naive. I understand that this kind of sea change in medicine in this country is very difficult, and it just takes time and a lot of education. So what you're trying to do, I'm more than happy to cooperate and assist in any way that I can.
Well, you're doing so. And, you know, I was talking to Dr. Henderson about this on the prior episode because at the time that he became involved in the Duntsch cases, he was not affiliated with a major hospital chain. He wasn't in a large corporate-owned medical group. And so nobody was really breathing down his neck, telling him to be quiet and don't cause any trouble. You know, conversely, you were practicing surgery at a large hospital that was part of a national hospital chain. And I wonder if Duntsch had been at your hospital and you had been speaking out against him being at your own hospital, if you think you might have faced some backlash.
First of all, that's speculation. But I can tell you that Duntsch would not have lasted 2 weeks at the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah.
When he first went into practice, you you may remember this. He abandoned a patient in the hospital that he had operated on. And I think he went to Las Vegas.
Yep.
And left that patient in the hands of a couple of his then partners in a practice that he had only just entered.
Yeah.
And he didn't even alert the nurses that he was leaving town and signing out to this fellow, nor did he alert his so-called partner that he was leaving. That would have cost him his hospital privileges.
Yeah.
And that was his first case.
Right. Exactly. Well, it should have stopped in Tennessee, and the next best time for it to have stopped would have been there, but we know it didn't.
Right.
But, you know, I guess the reason I was asking that question, and you objected to my question based upon that it called for speculation. So sustained. Your objection is sustained. But I just wondered if you did face any repercussions from speaking out.
No. None.
Well,
as a matter of fact, I'm still approached from time to time by physicians patting me on the back for the efforts made in the Duntsch case. Yeah. I remember not that long ago, a couple who were eating at the same restaurant. He is a neurosurgeon and his wife is a nurse. And they both came over to the table, apologized for interrupting, but they wanted to thank me for the efforts that were expended dealing with Duntsch. So locally, there has been nothing but support. The people who trained, so-called trained Duntsch, they have taken exception and they've made all sorts of threats to me and to my colleagues over this case.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate, to put it mildly. So I want to talk very briefly about your testimony in the criminal trial, being sort of face-to-face, eye to eye with Christopher Duntsch. And Michelle Schugert was a guest on a prior episode, and she said the first time she thought it ever dawned on Duntsch that he had actually done something wrong was during your testimony in the trial. Had you heard that before?
Yes, I actually heard it from the defense attorney who is the male defense attorney who was defending Duntsch, that he didn't realize how bad Duntsch really was as a neurosurgeon until he learned the details from that testimony.
And interestingly, you know, we're accustomed in civil malpractice cases to have what they call the battle of the experts. So there would typically be, in this case, a neurosurgeon testifying on behalf of the patient, a neurosurgeon testifying on behalf of the defendant. In this case, there was no physician of any sort who testified that Duntsch's medical decision-making was appropriate, that his surgical techniques were appropriate, or anything like that. But there was one neurosurgeon who testified, Dr. Carlos Bagley, and his testimony was basically that the only way this happens is that when the system fails the patient. What did you make of that testimony? That it was essentially, the way I think of it is that, yeah, Dr. Duntsch was a monster, but it's the system's fault because the system knew he was a monster and they perpetuated him.
If I remember correctly, Carlos Bagley felt that and testified that he was badly trained and blamed the training program. There was no defense of the work that Duntsch did. There's no credible defense. You can't defend against the level of profound incompetence, errors, unequivocal errors in wrong diagnosis, wrong operation done negligently, and in some cases not even realizing the adverse event was due to negligence, and in one case, the adverse event was the death of the patient that was potentially salvageable. The patient who had a laceration of their iliac artery, patient had undergone a fairly routine lumbar disc operation, and Duntsch poked a hole through ligaments in the front of the spine and lacerated a major vessel in the patient's pelvis.
Yeah.
The patient lost a lot of blood internally that wasn't readily apparent, but their blood pressure dropped precipitously. And that patient was transferred to the recovery room, and Duntsch never knew that this was a possible complication. And so the patient died, and it was at autopsy that the autopsy surgeon identified the holes in ligaments that should not have happened, and the location of it was directly adjacent to the artery that he lacerated. This is a complication that can happen. It's rare, but it is something that every neurosurgical resident has beaten into their head in the first year of residency because it's so catastrophic and is a preventable death. All you have to do is turn the patient over, open the abdomen, and stop the bleeding. So any patient that has a lumbar disc operation has that potential for complication. But every orthopedic surgeon and neurosurgeon knows or should know of this possibility.
Yeah.
Duntsch didn't.
You were quoted as saying, "You can't not know and be a neurosurgeon."
Correct.
And I think that sums it up pretty perfectly. Well, let's end it by me asking you this question. And people joke with me a lot too, like, "Kay, you're at a point in your career, why don't you take up golf or, go on long extended cruises or something like that? Why start a podcast? Why keep practicing medical malpractice law? Why don't you just kick your feet up? You've done your part." And so I would kind of say the same to you. You've done your part. You did great things in your clinical practice. You did everyone a great service with your work in the Dr. Duntsch cases. So why are you still involved? Why do you care?
There's unfinished business, Kay. And once you take on this kind of responsibility, you want to follow it and see whether or not changes that need to be made can be made. And if in some way I can cooperate with the people who are taking this forward, I'm more than happy to do it, as long as I have the physical and mental capabilities to do that.
Well, you're a blessing. I'm happy to have you in my life, and you're a blessing to a lot of people, and you're very much appreciated. So
Thank you.
we'll keep at it.
I will, as long as I can.
Well, same here. Thank you so
Excellent.
much for joining, Dr. Lazar. Pleasure to have you, and I hope you'll come
Thank you.
back.
Anytime. My privilege.
Thank you so much.